I'm sorry, sir. We cannot accept. I'm going to need you to wait.
Wait for what? These are legitimate checks. My lawyer's on the phone right now.
I've already called the police.
What you just heard took place on January 21st, 2020, inside a TCF bank branch in Livonia, Michigan. And the man standing at that counter, calm, composed, holding checks he had every legal right to deposit, had already been through one of the most exhausting fights of his professional life. Sauntore Thomas was a 44-year-old black man and a United States Air Force veteran. He had spent 7 months fighting a racial discrimination lawsuit against his former employer. He had won. He had his settlement checks in hand, legitimate, verified, issued by a federal court process, and he had walked into his own bank that morning to deposit them and finally close the chapter. Instead, the bank called the police. 4 officers arrived. They questioned him in the lobby for over an hour. His lawyer was on the phone, offering to send documentation. The bank staff ignored her. The checks, which would clear without a single issue at a different bank the very next morning, were treated as evidence of fraud. The reason, Thomas said, was not complicated. It was not mysterious. It did not require an algorithm or a supervisor or a promotion committee to explain it. If I was white, he told reporters afterward, this wouldn't be happening. His attorney had a name for what had just occurred. She called it banking while black. And the irony at the center of this story, the irony that made it land on the front page of the Washington Post, the New York Times, and news outlets in 14 countries, is this. The checks Sauntore Thomas was trying to deposit were his settlement from a racial discrimination lawsuit. He was discriminated against while trying to collect his discrimination money. This is the full story. Every detail of it is real. Before we go any further, drop a comment right now and tell me where you are watching from. And tell me this. Have you ever been treated with suspicion in a place where you had every right to be? A store, a bank, a hotel lobby, a parking garage? Drop your answer below. Because what happened to Sauntore Thomas is not a story about one bank in one suburb of Detroit. It is a story about a pattern so common it has its own name. Hit subscribe. Because we tell the stories that institutions apologize for once and then quietly hope you forget. Stay with me. The full story is even more extraordinary than the headline. To fully understand what January 21st, 2020 meant to Sauntore Thomas, you need to understand what the 7 months before it had cost him. Sauntore had served his country in the United States Air Force. He had received an honorable discharge. He had built a career in the private sector, eventually landing a position at Enterprise Leasing Company of Detroit, a subsidiary of one of the largest car rental companies in the world. At Enterprise, Sauntore experienced what the legal complaint would later describe as a racially hostile and discriminatory work environment. The specifics of that case were covered by a confidentiality clause in the settlement agreement. What is known is that Sauntore filed a formal complaint, retained attorney Deborah Gordon, and pursued the matter through the legal system for 7 months. 7 months of depositions, of documentation, of reliving the details of what had been done to him in the workplace. 7 months of the emotional weight that every discrimination plaintiff carries, the doubt, the pushback, the question of whether the system will actually deliver what it promises. On January 13, 2020, it delivered. Sauntore Thomas settled his case against Enterprise Leasing Company. The settlement totaled $99,000, issued in 3 checks, one for $59,000, one for $27,000, and one for $13,000. Those checks were hand-delivered to him that morning. He held them. He looked at them. 7 months of fighting, and there they were, tangible, real, the legal system having worked exactly as it was supposed to. He called his bank. He confirmed the branch location. He drove to TCF Bank in Livonia, Michigan, walked through the door with his checks, and approached the counter. He had been in the building for less than 10 minutes when the teller told him the police had been called. The assistant branch manager at TCF Bank in Livonia had decided, upon examining Sauntore's checks, that they were suspicious. Not because they had been flagged by the issuing bank. Not because the routing numbers were invalid. Not because any standard fraud detection system had raised an alert. Because, in her assessment, something about them did not seem right. Sauntore asked what the problem was. He was told the checks needed to be verified. He asked how long that would take. He was told to wait. He waited. Time passed. No one came back to the counter with an update. Sauntore called his attorney, Deborah Gordon. Gordon called the bank directly. She offered to send screenshots of the federal court complaint, the settlement agreement, and the documentation confirming the check's origin. The bank refused to engage with her. Gordon later told reporters, "There's no doubt in my mind they could have determined that on their own. I mean, call the bank that issued the check. You're a bank. Isn't that what you're there to do?" Instead, the assistant manager called the Livonia Police Department. 4 officers arrived within minutes. They questioned Sauntore Thomas in the lobby of his own bank, a bank where he held an account in good standing, for over an hour. They asked him about the checks. He explained. He pointed them to his attorney on the phone. He provided every piece of documentation he had with him. No arrests were made. No criminal charges were filed. Because there was no crime. Because the checks were exactly what Sauntore said they were. But for over an hour, a Black Air Force veteran who had just won a racial discrimination lawsuit stood in a bank lobby being questioned by 4 police officers about money he had legally, rightfully, and exhaustingly earned. He later said he was terrified. Not because he had done anything wrong, but because he knew exactly how quickly a situation involving 4 police officers and a black man could turn in a direction that had nothing to do with truth. His lawyer was on the phone offering documentation. The checks had already been verified by the issuing bank. The only thing the TCF branch needed to do was make one phone call. They chose to call the police instead. At what point do you think the bank crossed the line? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. When the police finally left, having found no evidence of any crime, because there was none, Sauntore Thomas did 2 things. First, he closed his account at TCF Bank. He gathered his checks, walked out of the branch, drove to a Chase bank, opened a new account, and deposited all 3 checks. They cleared by the following morning. 12 hours. No questions. No police. No hour-long interrogation in a lobby. Just a bank doing what banks are supposed to do. Second, he called Deborah Gordon and told her to file another lawsuit. Gordon filed the complaint in Wayne County, Michigan on January 23, 2020, 2 days after the incident. The lawsuit named TCF Financial Corporation as the defendant and alleged race discrimination under Michigan's Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act. It accused the branch of treating Sauntore less favorably than other customers because of his race, and of subjecting him to a humiliating and prolonged police interrogation on the basis of a suspicion that had no factual foundation beyond the color of his skin. Gordon's statement to the press was 7 words long and required no elaboration. Something else was afoot here. Banking while black. The story broke nationally within 48 hours. The Washington Post ran it under the headline "Banking While Black." The New York Times covered it. ABC News, NBC News, CNN, the Detroit Free Press, The Hill, every major outlet picked it up within days. What made it spread was not just the injustice, it was the irony. The specific, devastating, almost unbelievable irony that the checks Sauntore was trying to deposit were from a racial discrimination settlement. That the very proof of one system's acknowledgement of the harm done to him had become the trigger for that same harm to be done to him again, in a different building, by different people, with the same result. A black man being treated as a suspect for doing nothing wrong. People who had never heard of TCF Bank knew its name within a week. People who had experienced similar treatment at banks, at stores, at hotels, at car dealerships, people who had been followed, questioned, surveilled, and suspected for the crime of existing while black in a space where someone with institutional power had decided they did not belong, shared Sauntore's story because it was also their story. TCF Bank issued a public apology. A spokesperson stated that the bank condemns racism and discrimination in all forms and admitted that the police should never have been called. The branch manager acknowledged that the bank could and should have verified the checks through standard banking procedures without involving law enforcement. The apology came after the lawsuit was filed, after the story was on the front page of national newspapers, after the damage had already been done. TCF Bank and Sauntore Thomas reached an out-of-court settlement. The financial terms were not publicly disclosed, a common condition of corporate discrimination settlements designed to limit the public record of what the conduct was worth in dollar terms. What was public was the apology. What was public was the admission that the police should not have been called. What was public was the bank's acknowledgement, however carefully worded, that what happened to Sauntore Thomas in that lobby on January 21, 2020, was wrong. And what was public, and what no settlement and no carefully worded statement could undo, was the story itself. The story of a black Air Force veteran who won a racism lawsuit on a Monday and was racially profiled at his bank on a Tuesday. A story that required no embellishment, no interpretation, and no expert commentary to understand. The facts were the argument. TCF Bank apologized and settled out of court, but the financial terms were never made public. Do you think a confidential settlement is real accountability or just a way for companies to pay for silence? Drop your answer in the comments below. Sauntore Thomas's case was not an isolated incident. It was a documented example of a pattern that researchers, civil rights attorneys, and consumer advocacy organizations have studied and named: racial discrimination in banking and financial services. Studies have consistently shown that black customers are more likely to be denied mortgages, more likely to receive higher interest rates on identical loan applications, more likely to have their financial documents subjected to additional scrutiny, and more likely to be treated with suspicion in financial service environments compared to white customers with equivalent or lesser financial profiles. A 2020 analysis by the National Community Reinvestment Coalition found that black loan applicants were denied at rates significantly higher than white applicants across multiple major lending institutions, even after controlling for income, credit score, and debt-to-income ratio. The disparity persisted across geography, across institution size, and across applicant profile. Banking while black is not a phrase Deborah Gordon invented on the day she filed that lawsuit. It is a phrase that emerged from a pattern documented across decades, a pattern in which the simple act of conducting financial business while black carries a risk of suspicion, surveillance, and institutional hostility that the same act does not carry for white customers. Sauntore Thomas walked into a bank with $99,000 in legitimate settlement checks and walked out with 4 police officers having spent an hour questioning him in the lobby. The checks cleared at Chase Bank the next morning. The experience of being questioned in that lobby by 4 officers, the fear he felt, the humiliation, the exhaustion of having just fought one discrimination battle only to find himself inside another one immediately that did not clear in 12 hours. Here is what Sauntore Thomas's story means for your rights as a banking customer. Under the Equal Credit Opportunity Act and the Fair Housing Act, financial institutions are prohibited from discriminating against customers on the basis of race in any aspect of financial services, including account opening, check cashing, loan decisions, and the application of fraud verification procedures. If you believe you have been subjected to discriminatory treatment by a bank or financial institution, you have the right to file a complaint with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the Federal Reserve, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, or your state's banking regulator, depending on which institution is involved. You have the right to consult a civil rights attorney. You have the right to file a lawsuit under state and federal civil rights law. Document everything: the date, the time, the names of the staff involved if you can obtain them, the sequence of events, what was said. Ask for written explanations of any decisions made about your account or your transactions. Those written records are evidence. And if your bank calls the police on you for a transaction that is completely legitimate, close your account, go to a different bank, and call a lawyer. That is exactly what Sauntore Thomas did, both times. Let me tell you what Sauntore Thomas's story is really about. It is not about one bank branch in one suburb of Detroit. It is not about one assistant manager who made a bad decision on a Tuesday morning. Those things matter, but they're the surface. The deeper story is this: Sauntore Thomas had done everything right. He had served his country. He had worked. When his workplace mistreated him because of his race, he did not accept it quietly. He fought it through the proper legal channels, and he won. He had a settlement check. He had a lawyer. He had documentation. He walked into his bank with every piece of evidence that the legal system had given him to prove that he was owed what he was owed. And the bank called the police anyway. Not because of the checks. The checks were fine. Not because of the numbers. The numbers cleared overnight somewhere else. Because a black man walked into a branch in Livonia, Michigan, with a large sum of money, and someone in that branch decided that did not add up. Without evidence. Without a system flag. Without a single fact beyond the one fact that should never have been a factor. His attorney called it banking while black. But it could just as easily be called winning while black. Collecting what you are owed while black. Trying to close one painful chapter and open a new one while black. Sauntore Thomas has an honorable discharge from the United States Air Force. He won a federal racial discrimination lawsuit. He deposited $99,000 at Chase Bank the following morning without a single question being asked. The only thing that was different between Tuesday at TCF and Wednesday at Chase was the bank. Everything else, the man, the checks, the money, the legitimacy, was exactly the same. If this story lit something up in you, hit that like button and share this video. Share it with everyone you know who has ever been followed in a store, questioned in a lobby, watched at a counter, or made to feel like a suspect in a space where they had every right to be. Drop a comment. Have you ever experienced banking while black, or shopping while black, or existing while black in a space that made you feel like a suspect? I want to hear your story. Drop it below. And do you think the confidential settlement was enough? Or should TCF have been required to face a public jury verdict the way UPS did? Tell me what you think. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Every week we bring you the stories that companies settle quietly and hope disappear. We make sure they don't. We'll see you in the next one. Stay sharp out there, and remember, document everything, know your rights, and never let anyone make you feel like a criminal for collecting what you earned.